The stranger who saved her in the rain was on every billboard. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us go back to our main character. The city was still wet from last night's storm when Lila Tran arrived at the glass tower of Harlow Vision. She had been summoned for a meeting she did not understand, her cheap heels clicking nervously on the marble floor. The receptionist pointed her toward the top floor, and for a second, Lila thought there must have been a mistake. She was just a freelance illustrator who delivered food on weekends to pay rent, not someone meant to stand in a place where the air smelled like power and money. But when the elevator opened, she saw him. Evan Hart. The man who had pulled her out of the street during the thunderstorm, the stranger who had wrapped his coat around her shoulders and vanished before she could even say thank you. Now he stood in a tailored gray suit, perfectly dry, perfectly composed, and entirely out of her world. His voice was calm, low, almost unreadable. "Miss Tran," he said, gesturing toward the seat across his desk. "I am glad you came. There is something I need to ask of you." Lila sat, trying to hide the fray in her sleeve. You are the man from the rain," she murmured. Evan nodded once, then slid a thin folder toward her. "I need you to marry me," he said simply. The words hung in the air like lightning about to strike. Lila blinked, certain she had misheard. "Excuse me?" "It is a business arrangement," Evan continued, his gaze steady. 6 months. You will be compensated generously. I need stability in the public eye after last week's scandal. You need financial security. We can help each other." Her pulse hammered in her ears. This was insane. She barely knew him. She still had his coat hanging on the back of her chair at home, its scent of rain and cedar clinging to her walls like a secret. "You are serious?" she asked. He leaned forward, his tone turning soft but firm. "I do not joke about contracts, Miss Tran. You saved me that night, though you do not know it. Now let me return the favor." Lila's throat tightened. She looked at the ring box he placed on the desk, its lid reflecting the morning light. "Marry me," Evan said again, voice calm as if he were proposing a simple deal. "Think of it as a contract." Her hands trembled. She thought about her mother's hospital bills, her overdue rent, and the countless rejection emails that filled her inbox. Against all logic, she felt something inside her shift. Maybe it was desperation, maybe gratitude, maybe something else entirely. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "All right. I will sign it." Evan exhaled slowly, as if releasing a weight he had carried too long. "Then we have an agreement," he said, sliding the pen toward her. As she signed her name, Lila felt the world tilt, one signature separating the girl who once rode a bicycle through puddles from the woman now bound by a billionaire's promise. Outside, the city gleamed under the rising sun, and for the first time, the rain felt like it had changed everything. The papers were signed 2 days later in a private office high above the city. Lila sat across from Evan as the notary stamped the final page. The whole thing felt surreal, like she was acting in someone else's life. When the notary left, silence lingered between them. Evan leaned back slightly, his expression unreadable. "Our agreement begins today," he said. "You will move into my penthouse this evening. The media will expect photographs, but we can control what they see." Lila nodded, her fingers twisting together in her lap. "Understood." He slid a keycard across the table. "You will have the guest room. My assistant, Claire, will help you with public appearances and wardrobe. You will receive a detailed schedule for the next 6 months." His tone was so professional it almost hurt. She wondered if he even remembered the rain that had connected them in the first place. That night, Lila packed her small suitcase. Her mother called from the clinic, voice weak but cheerful, asking if she was doing all right. Lila lied, saying she had found a steady job. When she arrived at Evan's penthouse, the doorman greeted her by name. The elevator opened directly into a world of glass and quiet white marble floors, a wall of windows overlooking the skyline, a living room larger than her entire apartment. Evan was standing by the window, a phone pressed to his ear. He ended the call when he saw her and offered a polite nod. "Welcome home, Mrs. Hart." The title made her throat tighten. "You do not have to call me that," she said softly. "It is only for appearances." He smiled faintly. "Appearances are everything in my world." He walked toward her, his movements controlled, deliberate. "I will not invade your privacy. Think of this as a partnership. We simply have to look convincing." Lila managed a nod, though her heart pounded too fast. The next few days felt like a blur. A team of stylists arrived with racks of dresses and shoes. A photographer came to take staged photos of the happy couple for a charity magazine. Evan's hand rested lightly on her back during the shoot, his smile flawless. Only when the camera flashed could she feel the tension in his shoulders, the effort it took for both of them to pretend. When the photographer left, Lila exhaled shakily. "Do you always live like this?" she asked. Evan shrugged. "It is part of the business. I sell perfection. But lately, perfection feels like a cage." His words hung in the air, unexpected and raw. That night, unable to sleep, Lila stepped out onto the balcony. The wind was cool, the city lights glittering below like spilled diamonds. She heard footsteps and turned to see Evan join her, holding 2 mugs of tea. "You did well today," he said, handing her one. "Thank you for enduring the chaos." "It is your world," she murmured. "I am just passing through." He looked at her for a long moment, his expression softer than she had ever seen. "Maybe that is what I need. Someone real to pass through it." Lila felt her chest tighten again, unsure what to say. He turned back toward the city, the lights reflecting in his eyes. For the first time since they met, the silence between them did not feel cold. It felt like the beginning of something neither of them had planned for. A week into their arrangement, Lila began to understand the rhythm of Evan Hart's world. Every morning started with meetings, camera flashes, and carefully staged smiles. By afternoon, he was buried in calls with investors, while she studied the list of public appearances she was expected to attend. The only time they spoke without pretense was late at night, when the city quieted and the mask of glamour slipped away. One evening, Evan returned from a board dinner looking tense. He loosened his tie and poured a glass of water before speaking. "Tomorrow's charity gala is important," he said. "You will be beside me the entire evening. I need you to remember the details we practiced." Lila looked up from the notebook where she had been sketching. "Smile, nod, answer politely, avoid politics," she recited. He allowed a small smile. "You are a quick learner." When he turned to leave, she added quietly, "You could just be yourself, you know. People might like that more than perfection." He paused at the door, meeting her eyes. "Perfection is what keeps this company alive, Lila." Then he was gone. The next night, the ballroom shimmered with gold light and the hum of expensive laughter. Lila wore a midnight blue gown chosen by Claire. Evan took her arm as they entered, their reflections caught in the mirrored walls. Cameras clicked instantly, and his voice dropped low. "Just breathe. Follow my lead." They greeted board members, posed for photos, and exchanged empty compliments with people who looked at her with thinly veiled curiosity. To them, she was the mysterious wife who had appeared from nowhere. But when the host announced, "Mrs. Hart will give a few words on behalf of the Harlow Vision Foundation," Lila froze. That was not in the plan. Evan's brows furrowed, but she felt his hand on her back, steady and warm. She walked to the microphone, her heart thundering. For a moment, she could not remember a single rehearsed line. So she spoke from the heart. "I am not used to rooms like this," she began softly. But I know what it is like to work hard for something you believe in. The rain that drenched you yesterday might be the same rain that helps flowers bloom tomorrow. So maybe kindness and patience are just investments we cannot see yet." The room fell silent, then erupted into applause. Evan's gaze found hers, pride flickering behind his calm expression. When she returned to his side, he leaned in just enough to whisper, "You improvised." She nodded nervously. "Was that bad?" He shook his head, the corner of his mouth lifting. "It was perfect." Later that night, as their car pulled away from the gala, Lila stared out the window at the glowing city. "They looked at me like I was pretending to belong," she said quietly. Evan's hand rested on the seat between them. "You do belong," he said simply. "You made them believe in something real tonight. That is more than most people ever manage." Lila turned toward him, seeing not the man from billboards but someone human, tired, and searching. She wanted to thank him, but the words tangled in her throat. The city lights flickered across his face, softening his sharp edges. For the first time, she thought that maybe this contract was not the trap she once feared. It might be the beginning of something she did not yet have a name for. The morning after the gala, the news headlines were everywhere. Evan Hart's new wife steals the spotlight. Photographs of Lila smiling under the chandeliers filled every business page and lifestyle feed. In some, she looked radiant. In others, she looked like an intruder among elites. Lila read the comments with a sinking feeling. Some praised her authenticity, but others called her a fraud, a woman from nowhere pretending to fit in. She closed the laptop and exhaled shakily. Evan entered the room carrying 2 cups of coffee. He had already seen the news. "They will talk for a week, then move on," he said. "You did nothing wrong." Lila shook her head. "I am not used to being on display. It feels like I am living someone else's life." He handed her the coffee. "In a way, we both are." For a moment, their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. That afternoon, Claire arrived with a schedule full of interviews, photo shoots, and brand events. Lila hesitated, but Evan's calm reassurance made her continue. Days turned into weeks, and their public appearances became smoother. Behind the smiles, though, the boundaries of their contract began to blur. Late one night, after another exhausting charity event, Lila found Evan on the balcony again, staring at the city below. "You never stop working," she said softly. He glanced over his shoulder. "Work is safer than feeling." She stepped closer. "You talk like someone who lost something." Evan's jaw tightened. "Someone," he corrected quietly. "My father built this company and died defending it. I promised myself never to let it fall apart." Lila nodded, the cold wind brushing her hair across her face. "And what about you? What if keeping it together means losing yourself?" He looked at her then, truly looked, the storm in his eyes softening. "Maybe that is what this marriage is teaching me," he said. "That there is more to life than control." The next morning, a new challenge arrived in the form of a glossy magazine cover. It featured a photograph of Evan's former fiancée, a glamorous model, with the headline, "The Woman Evan Hart Left Behind." Rumors spread like wildfire, suggesting his marriage was only for publicity. Reporters camped outside the penthouse, shouting questions every time they appeared. Lila felt the pressure building like a wave. "I cannot do this," she whispered one night, tears threatening to fall. "They will never see me as anything but fake." Evan reached for her hand. "You are the only real thing in this entire circus," he said. "Let me handle it." But he could not control the storm. The next day, an investor leaked a false statement claiming the Harlows were reconsidering Evan's leadership because of the scandal. The board demanded an emergency meeting. Lila offered to skip it, afraid of making things worse, but Evan insisted she come. In the gleaming boardroom, surrounded by men in suits, whispers followed them as they entered. One of the directors leaned forward, voice dripping with judgment. "Mr. Hart, your personal decisions are beginning to affect company stability." Are we to believe this marriage is legitimate? Evan's hand tightened over Lila's. You can believe whatever you like, he said evenly. But I will not allow anyone to insult my wife. Lila's heart pounded as silence fell over the room. For a brief second, the contract between them felt irrelevant. In that moment, he was not a CEO protecting his image. He was a man standing up for her. As they left the meeting, he glanced at her, a faint smile breaking through the tension. You did not have to be here, he said. Yes, I did, she replied. If this is a partnership, then we face everything together. And for the first time since their deal began, Evan realized she meant it. The following week brought a strange calm after the storm. The scandal began to fade, and business slowly returned to normal, but something in Evan had changed. He spent more time at home, often joining Lila in the kitchen instead of hiding behind meetings. One evening, she found him trying to help prepare dinner, sleeves rolled up, holding a knife awkwardly. She laughed softly. You are going to lose a finger if you hold it like that, she said. Evan raised an eyebrow, pretending to be offended. I am a quick learner, he replied, though the tomato he was cutting looked more like a massacre. They ate together at the counter, no photographers, no reporters, just two people sharing silence that no longer felt heavy. When Lila asked him about his next campaign, Evan surprised her. I am thinking of changing it, he said. Something more authentic. People are tired of perfect. They want to see honesty. She tilted her head. That sounds like something I said once. He smiled faintly. It is something you live by every day. Later that night, as rain began to fall outside, they stood by the window, watching droplets race down the glass. Lila whispered, Do you ever think about that night? Evan's gaze softened. Every day, he admitted. It was the first time in years I felt seen, not as a brand, not as a headline, just as a man. The air between them grew warmer, quieter. He reached up to brush a strand of hair from her cheek, but stopped halfway, lowering his hand instead. We should keep things professional, he said, though his voice lacked conviction. Lila smiled sadly. We both know this stopped being just professional a long time ago. The next morning, she woke to find a note on the counter. Early meeting. Back by noon. But hours passed, and he did not return. By afternoon, the news broke again, this time more brutal than before. A gossip outlet had released private photos of Evan's ex and claimed his marriage to Lila was part of a larger publicity stunt orchestrated by the company. The internet exploded with accusations. Her phone would not stop buzzing. She found Evan in his office when he finally came back, his expression cold and controlled. Who did this? She asked. He closed his laptop. A rival investor, most likely. But the damage is done. The board wants me to issue a statement denying everything, including us. Her breath caught. Denying us? Evan looked at her with regret. They think if I declare the marriage a mistake, the stock will recover. Lila stared at him, heart pounding. So that is it? You will pretend none of this ever happened? He stepped closer, his tone low. You think I want that? I am trying to protect you. By erasing me, she whispered. The silence between them cut sharper than any argument. Finally, she picked up her purse and headed for the door. You are not protecting me, Evan. You are protecting what you think people expect from you. He called after her, but she did not stop. That night, Lila packed her few belongings and left the penthouse. The elevator doors closed slowly, reflecting her tired face in the glass. Outside, the rain was falling again, soft and endless. She walked through the streets without an umbrella, the city lights blurring around her. Each step felt heavier than the last, but she kept walking. In her pocket was the wedding ring he had given her, now cold against her skin. She held it tightly, whispering to herself, it was supposed to be just a contract. But deep down, she knew it had become something much more, something she could no longer deny. Days turned into weeks, and Lila tried to rebuild her life quietly. She found a small apartment above an art supply store and spent her days sketching, painting, and trying not to think about the man she had left behind. Her name was still floating across gossip sites, but the noise no longer reached her the way it once did. Each morning she walked past the corner cafe where the smell of roasted coffee mixed with the sound of traffic, a reminder that the world kept turning no matter how much her heart stood still. One evening, while she was finishing a portrait for a local charity auction, her phone buzzed with a message from Claire, Evan's assistant. It was brief. "You should see this. Channel 7. Now." Lila turned on the television. The image filled the screen. Evan standing at a podium, facing dozens of reporters. His jaw was tight, his voice steady, but there was something different in his eyes, something raw. "I have made mistakes," he said. "But my marriage to Lila Tran was never a performance. It began as a contract, yes, but she changed me. She reminded me that authenticity is not weakness, it is strength. If this costs me everything, so be it. I will not erase her." Cameras flashed like lightning, and reporters shouted questions, but Evan's words had already spread across the internet within minutes. Lila sat frozen, her chest tightening. She could not believe what she had heard. For the first time, he had chosen truth over image. That same night, she received another message from Claire. He resigned. Walked out after the press conference. Lila felt tears rise without warning. She stared at her unfinished painting, a faceless figure standing in the rain, and suddenly picked up her brush, painting the face she had been avoiding all along. Evan's face. The next morning, she went to the gallery where the charity auction was being held. The event was already crowded when she arrived, her painting displayed near the entrance. She was not prepared for what happened next. A hush spread through the room as Evan walked in, dressed simply, no entourage, no cameras. He carried a small frame under his arm. When their eyes met, everything else disappeared. He approached her slowly. "You have been hard to find," he said. Lila swallowed, unsure what to say. "You are supposed to be running a company." He smiled faintly. "I am running after something else now." He handed her the frame. Inside was the original contract they had signed, the ink faded, the corner slightly burned. "I kept this," he said. "But I do not need it anymore." Lila looked up at him, her voice trembling. "What do you need, Evan?" His answer came softly, but every word carried weight. "You." For a moment, neither of them moved. The crowd around them began to fade into background noise. Then he reached into his coat pocket and revealed something familiar, the wedding ring she had left behind. "You once said it was just a contract," he said, taking her hand. "What if we make it something real this time?" Her eyes filled with tears as she whispered, "No conditions?" He smiled, his thumb brushing the back of her hand. "No conditions. No cameras. Just us." The applause that followed was gentle, genuine, like rain falling on warm pavement. For the first time in months, Lila felt the weight in her chest lift. She nodded, whispering, "Then yes. I will sign again." But instead of paper, it was her heart that signed this time. The weeks that followed felt like a new beginning. Evan and Lila no longer lived under the shadow of contracts or headlines. They spent their mornings in quiet cafes, sharing simple breakfasts, and their evenings working side by side in Lila's small studio. Evan had invested in the gallery that once displayed her paintings, not as a gesture of wealth, but as a way to help her grow. "You do not owe me anything," she told him one night as she painted near the window. He smiled softly. "I know. That is why I want to." Their connection deepened in ways that words could not describe. The love that had once been buried under fear and formality now unfolded like light through the clouds after a storm. One rainy afternoon, Evan received a call from a charity foundation that wanted to feature Lila's art in their upcoming exhibition called The Art of Renewal. He insisted on handling the arrangements quietly, wanting it to be a surprise. On the day of the event, Lila arrived at the venue and froze as she saw her name printed across the entrance banner, The Art of Lila Tran. Inside, the walls were filled with her sketches, moments of struggle, resilience, and hope. At the center hung one final piece, a painting of two figures standing in the rain, their hands almost touching. Beneath it was a small plaque that read, "The night that changed everything." Evan appeared beside her, his voice gentle. "Do you like it?" Lila turned to him, tears glimmering in her eyes. "You did all this?" He shrugged lightly. "You showed me what truth looks like. I just gave it a frame." As guests began to applaud, Evan took her hand and led her to the center of the room. The lights dimmed slightly, and a hush fell over the crowd. He spoke clearly, his words steady but full of emotion. "For a long time, I thought love was another transaction. But this woman taught me that love is the only thing that cannot be negotiated. It can only be given freely." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple ring, one without diamonds or shine. "Lila Tran," he said, dropping to one knee, "will you marry Menet for a contract, not for headlines, but for forever?" The room erupted in gasps and applause. Lila covered her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Yes," she whispered. 1,000 times yes." Evan slipped the ring onto her finger, his smile breaking into pure relief. Around them, the crowd clapped, but in that moment, there was only the sound of rain tapping gently against the glass roof above. It was the same rhythm that had started their story. The storm that had once separated them now became the song that brought them together for good. The days leading up to their wedding were quiet but filled with meaning. Evan and Lila decided to keep the ceremony small, inviting only a handful of close friends and colleagues who had stood by them through everything. There were no tabloids, no flashing cameras, and no contracts to sign this time, only handwritten vows and genuine smiles. The ceremony was held in the same art gallery where their story had come full circle. The walls still displayed her paintings, each one capturing a chapter of their journey. Lila wore a simple ivory dress that she had sewn herself, the hem brushed lightly with lace. Evan waited for her near the largest window, sunlight streaming behind him like a promise. When she entered, everyone fell silent. He reached for her hand and whispered, "You look like every moment I never thought I would deserve." She laughed softly, her voice trembling. "And you look like home." They stood beneath a single arch decorated with white lilies and eucalyptus. The officiant smiled as they exchanged vows, words spoken not from obligation but from gratitude. Lila promised to remind him that life could be beautiful without perfection, and Evan promised to never let pride come before honesty again. When the officiant declared them husband and wife, the room erupted in gentle applause. Evan leaned forward, kissing her with the quiet certainty of a man who finally understood what love meant. After the ceremony, guests gathered for a small dinner surrounded by candles and the warm glow of string lights. Lila's mother, recovered and smiling, gave a short toast, her eyes full of pride. "My daughter used to believe that dreams were too fragile for real life," she said. "But now I see she found someone who treats her dreams as carefully as she does." Evan raised his glass, his gaze locked on Lila. "She taught me that vulnerability is not weakness. It is the proof that you are alive." The room filled with clinking glasses and laughter. As the evening drew to a close, rain began to fall softly outside, like a blessing. Evan led Lila to the balcony, where city lights shimmered across wet pavement. "It always rains for us," she whispered. He smiled, wrapping his coat around her shoulders just as he had the first night they met. "Then maybe the rain is how the universe reminds us to start again." She leaned her head against his chest, the rhythm of his heartbeat matching the distant thunder. For a long while, they stood in silence, watching droplets slide down the glass and listening to the sound that had carried them from strangers to soulmates. There were no contracts, no promises of perfection, only love, real and unshakable, blooming quietly beneath the rain. 1 year later, the gallery that once hosted their wedding had become something even greater, a foundation dedicated to supporting young artists who could not afford to showcase their work. Lila managed the creative programs while Evan oversaw the operations, but he insisted that her name come first on every document and every plaque. Above the entrance hung a simple sign that read, "The Heart Foundation for Art and Renewal." On the first anniversary of their marriage, they hosted a small exhibit titled One Kindness Day. The centerpiece was a framed photograph of a rain-soaked street, a single coat draped over a woman's shoulders, and beside it a handwritten note that said, "The night it all began." As guests wandered through the gallery, Lila watched quietly from the corner, her heart full. When the evening crowd thinned, Evan came up behind her and slipped his arms around her waist. "You did this," he murmured. "You turned a single moment into something that changes lives." She leaned back against him. "No, we did this," she said softly. "It started with one act of kindness and became a lifetime of them." Outside, the sky began to darken, the faint patter of rain tapping on the glass roof above. Evan smiled at the sound. "It would not be our story without the rain," he said. "Do you think it is trying to tell us something?" Lila turned to face him, her eyes bright with warmth. "That every storm passes," she said, "but some leave behind the kind of light you never forget." He kissed her forehead, his voice barely above a whisper. "Then let us keep walking through the rain together." She smiled, holding his hand as they stepped outside onto the quiet street. The city glowed under streetlights, the rain falling gently like confetti from the sky. Evan pulled her close beneath his coat, and they walked with slow, steady steps, no cameras, no audience, just the rhythm of their hearts and the sound of rain. Somewhere behind them, the gallery lights shimmered through the windows, illuminating the framed artifacts of their story: the old contract, the wedding ring, and a single paintbrush sealed in glass, all symbols of where they had been and who they had become. Their laughter echoed softly into the night, carried away by the rain, leaving behind only a promise unspoken but deeply understood that love, when chosen freely, could turn even the heaviest storm into a beginning. And so, under that endless sky, Evan Hart and Lila Tran kept walking, hand in hand, proof that sometimes the most extraordinary stories begin with something as simple as one act of kindness.